we have a partner here, it's just like.
So you guys, this is probably the most boring topic for me across all of the panels. Adapting Sentai footage. So I'm curious, maybe a couple people can tell us why, what is it, like, do you want to be writers, or are you just kind of curious about how we adapt the show, or are you Sentai fans? Can somebody maybe tell us? Yeah, tell me.
I feel like, adapting the Sentai footage part of the foundation of making the show more indicative. Without that, or you have to do things, so I think it's part of the foundation, part of what made it power. Without adapting.
And how many people here by show of hands are here because they want to be writers and want to see how we write a show? And then how many people are just more interested in just the nuts and bolts process of adapting the show? So I'll only say that I think it's the only show, maybe some other Savant shows have done similarly, like Troopers and Rider. But I think it's one of the other than the Savant shows. Are there any other shows that do that? Take a show and steal the footage and put it on a show. So if you learn how to do this, it's kind of like being the master of the art that nobody wants. So be careful not to spend too much time perfecting this, because you can't take it anywhere else. At the same time, I'll say that story is story, and if you can learn to write stories and learn to put them together, whether it's footage or just something out of the mind, well, that's all very useful. Okay, so I'm going to shut up for a minute and let Greg introduce himself. Greg and I just met. I don't know Greg, he doesn't know me, but we're going to spend an hour together, so we'll tell you who we are.
Well, I'm Greg Aranowitz. I was the executive producer of SPD, as well as the writer, director, designer, makeup effects guy, builder, set guy. So kind of just had my hands a little bit of everything on SPD. And one of the jobs was to take the Sentai footage and figure out how to make it into our show.
And I'm Chip, and I worked on the pilot. I didn't have all this gray hair when I worked on the pilot. And I was a production manager back then. And then eventually I became the executive producer for the last 10 years or something. But I worked on the show for many years. We were Heimsman, and then Disney, and then Heimsman again, and then Hasbro. And my contract just ran out, right? I just finished. So I come here mostly just to meet you guys to see my old friends, the Rangers. But it's really fun when you guys have questions, because it's like shocking to me that people are interested in things like adapting the Sentai footage. But it's exciting that you guys are interested, so I'll tell you what we know.
How many people here watch both versions of every season?
When you say both versions, you mean the Japanese version and then the...
Yeah, because we're talking about adapting. It's kind of like, you see one and then it becomes the other. Like, do people compare?
I think it's like all 9 days going on in the US and Japanese footage, Japanese something like that. I like NPR versus the Sentai footage in 2 different styles. So,
Yeah, well, it's, 2 different cultures, 2 different kinds of storytelling. I personally believe that in Japan, the whole thing with Power Rangers is kind of like, it's just like a different audience, in terms of who they're targeting. The show seems like much more fun and almost silly. And in here, even though it's still fun and often silly, it's like trying to make it more like cool. So it just seems like they'll do anything. There'll be an episode where there's a giant cup soup attacking the city, and then we get it. We're like, how do we make that cool? But I'm curious. So that's a lot of years much of the Sentai show did you get to see before starting each season? Like particularly, I was over with my girlfriend. Did you guys just have, because they were years ahead, did you guys get to pull from a bunch of different stuff, or did you still just get a season?
I got to your moderator. Sorry, but he got it at 11 o'clock.
Hey, can you turn off the air conditioning? Is that possible?
I'll talk to Dolores. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, I am so sorry. I was
Okay, we're going to start with that.
We just adapted.
We are again. Hello! Let me get me settled in. Hello.
Hello. Here we go. So glad to be doing this. Hi, my name is Justin Kizon. I'm a co-host for a podcast called Nothing New, a remake podcast, and another show called Disney Plus Diversity. I'm assuming you gentlemen have already introduced yourselves, but give me a second, guys. I'm so sorry.
Let me just tell you quickly. So, the Japanese are always making the show, right? They make like 50 episodes every year. They change the theme every year. They're hardworking, incredibly good at this. They've been doing it for a decade or two before we even started. Heinzmann went to Japan, saw the show. He and his friend shooted them and decided they would try the show here. They tried it once. They made a pilot, and nobody would pick it up because it was too violent, right? So a couple of years later, they tried it a second time. That's when I came on board. And they put together like a little 6 or 7 minute presentation, and we got picked up. He thought it would go 1 or 2 seasons. As it turns out, it went longer than that. But the way that, so what was your question you were asking about?
I was wondering how much material you got to work with.
So some seasons, Heinzmann's looking across all the shows that they did. Let's say they have 4 or 5 seasons you can choose from. At the time, they've done these TV shows, he looks at them and says, which ones are, as Red was saying, the coolest? Trains. In Japan, they have a fascination with trains. Here we don't, so we don't do trains. Maybe medieval. Okay, we're kind of okay with medieval. But what's the coolest thing in the world? Dinosaurs, right? It never goes out of fashion. So Heinzmann looked at that and said, I'm going to do the dinosaurs. He hired a couple of talented people, put together some scripts and things. If he had chosen one of the seasons that we're working on currently, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? Because the one we're working on currently, they haven't finished, which means they're starting to, they're giving you episodes, they're giving you literally back then it was videotapes, which is, if you don't know, it's a piece of plastic. Right? Anyway, we got VHS tapes, and they were sending to us as they get done. And we don't know if, let's say that there's 52 episodes, usually 50 or 52 episodes in a season in Japan, because they do it once a week. We look at the ones they send us, and sometimes we say, well, what about the next 20? They say, well, we're still shooting right now. We're getting to what we're done. So we would start a season, perhaps, and we don't even know how the show's going to end, right? Other times, I'm smart to look at them and say, well, if I choose this one, which is a rescue vehicles, that one was done 2 years ago, so we can just have all 52 episodes. The Heinzmann and his toy company is saying, which one's coolest, which one will sell the most toys? He doesn't care which tapes, which ones have seasons that are complete, which ones don't. But to Greg's answer, us in the story department is a real bitch if the season's not done yet, right? You're given, sometimes, literally, you're given pictures of the characters and pictures of the costumes in like 3 or 4 episodes, and that's it. You have no idea where it's going to go to.
Who's the villain?
Right. You don't know who's going to die, who's going to live, and you just don't know. And so you're saying, actors, and you're not even sure like, how many episodes it might be in. Now, more recently, we have a new problem, because now, let's say we have, for Hasbro or in the last few years, we have like 3 or 4 shows we can look at. Now, they've made maybe a dozen that are possible. What's changed in the last 10 or 15 years that limits our choices? Digital, and the aspect ratio of the frame. When we were kids, you tell me than I am, but when I was a kid, the TVs were like 3 to 4, right? And so nowadays we can't make a show out of 3 to 4, and it was shot on film, and the resolution is rather poor. So nowadays you have to buy footage that was shot in HD on digital so that it can be played on modern televisions. And if it wasn't shot that way, then forget it, we're not going to be able to air it. So obviously those seasons don't get chosen. So we're limited to choosing the seasons that are shot in the right ratio, hopefully that are complete, and then Salon or Hasbro, whoever owns the show, thinks it's cool and they can sell toys. The show has to be cool, and Hasbro, or excuse me, the Japanese people have, remember, they designed most of the toys because they're on the screen already. Well, some of their monsters are really kind of unacceptable. Some of them are really cool, so they choose the ones that are cool. And all of those decisions are made above our level. When they finally say to us, we're going to do dinosaurs based on this season, they might ask for our opinion, but really it's a marketing question, and they don't ask for our opinion on that.
We just have to make it work.
So finally they say, okay, this is what we're doing, and they give us a bunch of tapes as many as they can, and then what do we do with those tapes?
You watch them about 100 times. Sometimes you get translations, sometimes you're like, I have no idea what's happening, because they're not subtitled or anything.
They didn't used to be subtitled.
Yeah. And you just pick through and figure out like what clips, obviously nothing with the actors because of the VR actors, but anything where they're in full suits or anything with the Zords. And did you guys have like mandatory footage amounts?
We don't. No, sometimes it's 1 minute, sometimes it's 0. But we don't tell anybody that because like sometimes it's 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Honestly, 7 or 8 minutes normally means that's all fighting, and in my opinion, that's when it's boring.
Yeah. But sometimes the people above us are like, sometimes we do these things called clip shows where it's just like using as much footage as possible or recycling from other episodes. Because production-wise, the footages are paid for. Every time we have to go out with actors and shoot and build sets, that costs money. So it's like, the producers love when you use as much footage as possible. The writers are like, I'm trying to write this episode about these two characters falling in love, and somehow I have to write in this thing about a vending machine that goes crazy out in the city. And, so you're just looking through and you have to like write down. Again, I think now there's probably ways to do it all digitally, but like, because we also got VHS tapes, so you're like rewinding and fast forwarding, and then you're trying to write down the time code. And sometimes it's just like 3 seconds. You're like, oh, if I take this 3 seconds and I put it into this scene, I can make sense of it.
Yeah, hi. I actually have a very specific question for you, and it's regarding Lights with Whisper. The source material was Go-Go 5 in that show, and I found that the show you guys ended up creating kind of deviated from Go-Go 5. Obviously, you had to figure out how to use it. Go-Go 5. That was the Super Sentai show that Lights with Whisper. And the show deviated from that because that show had like a team of brothers and sisters who became a Sentai team. And you guys kind of went to a more everyone, all walks of life kind of attitude with that show. People from different, like expertise and things like that. And as a fan of like 80s Sentai for me, I found that show to be like a fun throwback to 80s Sentai. You had all aware that's what you guys end up doing or having any information of what I'm talking about.
So when you ask questions about me that were 15, 20, 30 years ago, or sometimes even yesterday, I just don't remember all this stuff. Because when you're producing the show, you got a million questions coming at you. For everything from what is this proper like, this is location work, the actor is sick today, the director was terrible shot, and so I apologize, but I don't remember all that stuff. Lightspeed Wrestling was really a fun episode because honestly you start off with looking at the footage and you get to see the images that are on there and you just get to play with it in your head and say, where does this take me? So for instance, was it Lightspeed Wrestling being underwater?
Yes.
So that was my idea. I mean, literally just sitting in a room, and a lot of people are not creative, they're the budget people, and then there's some writers who are creative, and those people are just having fun with it. Well, where do we go underwater? And the people say, no, they can't, that's too expensive. And then somebody else says, well, all we need is aquariums, and then pretty soon we'll allocate it to what we do. Remember, we're making a show for like 3 to 8-year-olds. They're very forgiving. You watch it in 2 minutes in, you just believe it's underwater, right? And yeah, it can be goofy and weird. this guy who worked in the art department. I'm not an art department person. I don't know how the hell they come up with dinosaurs and all this stuff on budget. Somehow or another, the writing staff and the producer staff will come up with these crazy ideas, looking at the footage, which is exactly what you're talking about, adapting the footage, and then the art department, which he is specialized in the past, and I'm not, somehow they come up with drawings, and you look at the drawings of the caves and the things in the underwater and all this stuff, and you say, yeah, but how are you going to do that? And they say, don't worry about how we're going to do it. I'm not going to explain that to you. That's not your job. I understand how we're going to do it. You give us a budget. We're going to hit the budget. Do you like these sets? And you say, I want these sets, but you can never do it on budget. And they say, oh, shut up. That's not your job. And somehow they come up with it. And you hug them all day long. And you love your crew because you ask for 8 and they give you 10. And that's when you know that you succeeded. When you have a crew that makes you look better than you are. Okay, so I talked to you.
No. Great. Actually, I have a question for you concerning, obviously, the Power Rangers TV. Again, very much, I kind of, similar question I asked Chip is that, I felt like your guys' show did a lot, took a lot from the source material. I felt a lot of decorating the show with some deviations with the characters. Except for Commander Crew, who is, by a lot of fans' account, one of the few direct, he was the Sentai character that you just brought over to the American version of the show. What is it about, Doggy Kruger, Commander Kruger, that you guys liked the initial concept, or what was it so much about that character that you felt that you could just keep the majority of that character for SRT?
Well, first of all, with Kruger, I'm a huge dog lover. I have 5 dogs. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is like a show about dogs in charge of the I thought, speaking from the art side, when they showed me the initial clips of Decorator, I was like, these Power Ranger suits are amazing, the Zords are amazing, the whole Future City aspects are amazing. I'm like, this Commander Kruger looks like the 1984 Olympic mascot. Again, it's a different aesthetic, a different, no knocking it, for their show, it completely worked. This is also a show where the Pink Ranger took a bubble bath every episode, her communicator was her back scrubber, so it just had a different sensibility. I wanted to make a serious show. So, but I still love the idea of them, so I was like, you know what? I'm not going to redesign this character from scratch. I'm going to just adapt it to as if this kind of high school mascot became a real boy, what would it look like? So I kept the colors, I kept the basic shapes, I just made it look real. Writing wise, I need to say, that's why I was curious, in all those years how much footage there was, because I was told that this was the first time in the history of the show that the Sentai version and the US version were shooting simultaneously. So I only received one tape to start, and they were still shooting everything else, to the point where we had no idea who the bad guy was going to be, and so I guess I got lucky that Disney, I don't know if they just were over it, they didn't care, or if they actually trusted the design, or they were just just figure it out. So I was able to create, Rum as our stable bad guy, so no matter what happens, even if they introduce another bad guy, we can make him a co-bad guy or whatever. But Kruger, the storyline was pretty clear at the beginning of what he was going to be. We just stuck with it. But do keep in mind, like you said, we carried a lot. Right off the bat, I changed it from they're a police squad, and I made it into an academy.
Right.
And I told Bruce, I said, yeah, I'll come on board, but I love Power Rangers, but I feel like it just needs a new version. The idea of, these 4 kids or 6 kids that an alien lands and Green Lanterns and says, you are now the most powerful kids in the universe. I'm like, I want to make a story about how to learn how to become that. And I got a lot of resistance, from the from the company and stuff. We finally broke through, and I think I don't know if anyone else has used that format, but I think it made a
refreshing kind of great.
Well, I think so. I trip back to you. So, Time Force, I found fascinating because I was also, I also was also watching Time Ranger as well, kind of comparing the two, and I found Time Force to also be one of the few Ranger seasons where it felt like almost an even more close adaptation of the original source material. You guys mostly stuck with that storyline of that season of the Super Sentai. Do you recall the reason why that year was like that?
Well, the first things I recall, so, again, I don't remember exactly, but the idea that we're going to go through time, we're going to have somebody in the future and in the past who are the same character or related somehow, it's pretty much true, right? Except if you're a little kid, you haven't seen all the movies that have already worn out that plot. So to them, it's like, this is a really great brand new plot, even though it's kind of not. So from our perspective, for that reason, and because, sometimes the footage in the Japanese are really good. Before there were still subtitles, in the story room, we had to, just sit there and watch the tape and kind of guess what they were saying, what was going on. But they're so good at their, the way they do their body motions and things, you can kind of understand the story. They aren't like a lot of American shows where they're just two people sitting and talk to each other and they have no idea what the plot is. But because of their expressions and the way they look, you can pick up a lot of it. So we would watch it, no subtitles, we would kind of guess our way into it. We would think, well, we kind of like that element, and they utilize it in the footage enough that we have to stick with it because there's two Red Rangers, you may as well stick together with their brother or something like that. It just makes it easier to sometimes utilize what they have. Now, so that's the answer to the question, but I want to tell you, you guys want to hear a funny story? Okay, so you were asking about the Lightspeed Rescue underwater thing. So we built this beautiful underwater base, right? And of course, everything's the last minute. So they're painting the last minute, we start to shoot in 2 days, and then like the night before, all these saltwater aquariums were there, and they had to put in all the fish, right? And we came in the next day, and all the fish were there. So we couldn't shoot because there's no fish. So anyway, it was a big problem. Maybe we could shoot, but we had to shoot with them like just a little corner of it. Which is what happens when you go on the film. You can't really have a crew of 100 people showing up. You can't decide how to film. So you have to somehow make it work. Another thing that Greg mentioned was, sometimes footage is unusable. We have certain rules on our show. To me, it used to be broadcast standards have these rules we had to follow. For instance, we can't have anybody hit anybody to the face or kick anybody to the head. You guys ever notice that on the show? So sometimes there's a really great shot the Japanese will do, or even our guys will do it, and accidentally or intentionally they'll hit them in the head. So how do we cover that up? We put a visual effect over it, right? We put an explosion or put a spark or something, because we can't show them hitting. Also, there's some footage that just comes from Japan, which is completely inappropriate. I don't know if some of you watched the Japanese show The Trains several years ago. And the Megazord is sleeping there. So for those of you who don't know what everybody's laughing about, it's that the part of the train is looks like a baby red penis.
I'm trying to walk around that, but yeah.
And so, you look at that, and you can either utilize the season and cut that out, or you put a tree in front of it or something. That's what we end up doing. We have shots of Japanese sometimes we use, and the shots are so wonderful. For instance, something flying through the air, the people are running and screaming, exploding, going off. We don't want to duplicate that shot. It costs a fortune. We want to use it. So what we'll do is we'll go to green screen and get some shots of Caucasian people or black people running, and we'll stick them in the screen because otherwise it's all Japanese, and that's not our show, right? So there's ways of fixing it, and other times you just throw it in the trash and say we can't use it.
We'll get to other videos. Greg, I just want to talk about the one moment in SPD that I think a lot of fans are a big fan of, which is I call it Nothing But Just a Circle. And do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Great.
Yeah, really? Are they big fans?
They're big fans of that. And it's funny because there was an Alpha Ranger, Delta Ranger crossover, but you guys can really utilize that footage and make this sequence to his original to your show. In my opinion, I feel that sequence to me really has the spirit of Super Sentai. It feels like something that would have come from a television show. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I mean, that's a hard one for me to talk about. I think that was definitely more on the Bruce side. I was kind of fighting the battle on those episodes because I knew we had to do the crossover, but I just again wanted to do something fresh and different, and we had two different timelines. Dino Thunder was the early 2000s, and then SPD was 2025. Coming up, hopefully we do some big anniversary things. Although there's no flying cars or aliens, so I'm super disappointed. Right? The particular footage we were using to make those episodes had this scientist that found these crystals and was experimenting with the crystals. And so I said, oh, this is brilliant, because those could be the dino gems, and we can tie this in where he's doing kind of like a Jurassic Park experiment, and he uses DNA from those crystals and brings the Dino Thunder Rangers back, like as clones. And Disney was just like, no, it's just time travel. I'm like you said, it's just such a trope, and it gets used so many times. And they were just like, no, kids won't understand cloning. And like when kids understand the space-time, and of course it was the one time where I just ended up screaming and yelling and fighting, but I lost, so it ended up being time work. So I was kind of tuned down on those episodes. Of course, later that year, the show came out called Clone Wars, that every child loved, and I was like, see. But in terms of the whole circle thing, a lot of people come up to me and kind of say, in a weird, I'm almost making fun of it. Yeah, it was just something. I think it was because so many shots of it, it went out for so long. But I'm glad.
I think it's very super.
There was also our episode that accidentally leaked out of order. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
So that whole, anytime anyone brings that up, it's just
sorry, I defend it, so.
Well, that's good.
This actually kind of a question for both of you. Was there any particular moment in the Sentai footage you guys watched that you liked, but maybe ended up not using?
Tons of them.
Please. Any specific you remember?
Well, no.
I'll take a yes.
It happens so often that they do something that you love, but you can't use it for one reason or another. And so if you have the money and the time, you just reshoot it. Or you reshoot it in your own way. And sometimes it's even better because we have, you guys can go to Japan, and you don't want to go to the first unit and watch the actor because that's really fun. I talked about actually the American show in New Zealand. It's all New Zealand crew now. You have two units. The first unit works with actors, walking and talking. The second unit all stunts. The second unit is mostly all the stunt crews all from Japan. And the same people who do some of the Japanese shows. And it's an astonishing thing to see. So you can ask them, you can look at something in the film and say, that's really amazing, but we can't utilize it for some reason or another. It doesn't work. Sometimes they have, for instance, great shots, but they have machine guns. Or great shots and their actors are drinking alcohol. No, we just can't do that. So we want to reshoot it. We want to use it to utilize in our episode because we love the plot point. And so we simply say to our crew, can we do this? And until 9 times out of 10, they figure out a way out. We are a really tight budget show, but still they figure out a way of doing it. And a lot of it comes from the fact that, especially on the second unit, it's a Japanese stunt crew, and they have the same mentality of people who shot the original show. I'm telling you, you go there, they're wearing spandex, they're rolling downstairs, they're smashing walls. One morning, I remember we were shooting on location in New Zealand, and the truck showed up late. Why? Because the Japanese guy was racing to the set, and he rolled it over on the side. It was full of stuntmen and stuff. He crashed the truck. And of course, all of the New Zealanders and the Americans were like, oh my God, is he okay? Where is he? Is there right? What happened? Is there another car involved? That's our first reaction. The guy gets to the set, and he's okay, and he has to stand before the whole Japanese crew, put his head down, and apologize for being late. And that's the Japanese mentality. You've held us up, you've cost us 10 minutes, and so you owe everybody an apology. I didn't even occur to me, 10 minutes, he crashed, whatever, it's going to cost time. But their first thought was, why the hell did it happen? And our first thought was, is it okay? Now, of course, that's not to say they don't care about it, just to say that they are very regimented.
Yeah, it's very disciplined.
If you give them a shot to do it, you have to be careful because they'll break bones to get that shot for you. So the answer is yes. There's things that you should use. You can, but you'll always find a way to figure it out and get it.
If I'm out again, I apologize if I'm 10 minutes late to the panel. You have an answer?
Yeah, I mean, because I only have one season, like I remember the footage very clearly. And I would say Gold Ranger. You know, we didn't get to use them because again, we were running simultaneously, so a lot of times we would only get episodes to write new episodes like the week before we would have to shoot them. We were already coming up to our finale, and they also, I think, we did 38 episodes and they did 44 or something. So they were still adding stuff when we were trying to tie up all these loose ends. And we were pretty much, mocking our final scripts, and we were like, here's some more tapes, and they had this beautiful gold Ranger, well, we can't do this. There was also the Nova Ranger, and I was just like, well, she's just showing up to grab Omega, so we just literally one shot and had it in there, but we couldn't get the gold in. At the time, because of the backup, Disney was like, well, you know what, we can't risk being behind next year waiting for their new footage, so maybe we'll just use everything we have in the second season of SPD. And we were like, oh, this is going to start the Gold Ranger company, and then pull the plug on it.
Can I ask you, Greg, when you have the Japanese movies do 50 episodes and you're only going to be 40, how do you decide which 10 to use?
Well, we didn't even get the other 10 to wrap out.
So, I'll have one question for you both, and then we'll take it to the audience. And this one, again, goes to both of you guys. Now, every year it seems like there's a rumor that there will be a season of Power Rangers that won't use Super Saiyan. They'll make their own, that rumor keeps happening. How do you guys feel about that? Do you think something is lost when you don't use Super Sentai?
Well, here's the thing. I think that it is possible, as you said, the second unit team, like a lot of times will go, like, oh, we can't use this piece of the fight, so we need a transitional thing that will combine these two clips, and they'll go and reshoot the entire thing, and then make it better a lot of the times. And so I kept saying to my producers, we have the team, the money's spent, like why are we locked into this footage? Because they kept saying like, oh, it's too expensive to shoot original footage. But we kind of were anyway. I mean, there's so much second unit footage that ended up on the floor that it could have been a whole show. That being said, the stuff with the Zords and everything, like nobody does it better. I feel like even if they put it in my hands, like I would get a little too, ILM with it and try and like have the buildings be like too real and too, like there's just something that screams Power Rangers that I don't think we would be able to reproduce. So if I had another shot to do it, I would love to be able to use like their Zord fights, but then everything else is great.
Can I say something? So, how many of you guys, by a show of hands, would prefer the show to become animated? We're going to be in trouble after that. And how many people wanted to stay live? And how many people wanted to stay as an adaptation of the Sentai footage to the Japanese in there? So, and I would agree because, as Greg said, the Zord footage is quite unique. I mean, it's so goofy, but it's almost like a rite of passage as a kid. You got to see this goofy Japanese footage, right? If you go to Japan, I've been there several times, and they actually have a sound stage. It's kind of small, probably about a little bigger than this room, but not too much bigger. And all they shoot in there is, for all their shows, they shoot the Megazord fight. That's interesting. It's a time bomb. And they have a good sound stage, and they have different skies that can drop down in the background, and they have the whole, like, I don't know, half of the warehouse is filled with big shelves, and on each shelf there's like the city buildings, and then there's the country buildings, and then there's the mountains, and outside generally are these big rolling, platforms with big mountains. They just push them in and move around, and they're all miniature mountains, miniature buildings, miniature cars. It's really a cool place to go to see this soundstage. And the guys who are in there working, that's all they do. They just, they don't know what the rest of the story is. They just know they have to fight between this monster and this monster in a country setting, and it has to last, 90 seconds long, or whatever it is. And that's all they do for a living. And if the Kiwi or Americans were going to start doing that, because there was a discussion during some of our seasons, hey, we should do our own. Why do they want to do their own? Because the toy company doesn't like the design of the Megazord, and they want to redesign it. But if we do that, we can't use the footage. And so they'd say to people, how much is it going to cost a sheet? It's very, very expensive, and you already own the footage from Japan. So literally, you pay zero or you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they say, well, okay, but can you do it? And my answer is, the footage that you're objecting to, they say, maybe they say, well, the Japanese footage isn't very dynamic. And I say, these people have done it for 50 years. You're asking me if we, in the very first year, can do better than they've done it after 50 years. And the answer is no, it's going to look like crap. Now, maybe after a few years it will look better and better because we can add visual effects and stuff. But, we're kidding ourselves if we think we're going to be as good as the Japanese right away. I mean, these people are really, really good. They aren't doing it casually. They're quite determined to do a good job. So we would say to them, for instance, if we were micro footage, we would say, at the beginning of the season, we would comment and say, could you give us more low-angle shots with cars in the background? Could you put more green screen characters running in the foreground to not give away that it's a miniature? Could you do, a little bit more backgrounds with moving cars instead of static cars? So we would give some opinions about the Megazord fights to try to lighten them up a bit. And the Japanese are they would listen very closely, and sometimes they would do what we want, sometimes they wouldn't. But usually they would, because they're team players, and I imagine that their deal is that they profit the more successful. The American show is they have a profit interest. So if we make a suggestion, then they would accommodate us. And one of the most interesting things the Japanese would do sometimes, they would come to us and say, what kind of we're developing the show next season, what kind of toys or what kind of vehicles, what kind of something would you like to put on the show that you've never put on before? And after we've done the show for 10 years, it's very useful for them to ask us that, right? From an American perspective, what would you want? And isn't that an amazing question to get? And so I say, well, I want a car that then, transforms into something flying. And they don't laugh at me, they get in a little huddle, they speak in Japanese, and they say, okay, what else? And sure enough, they come up with a car that then flies. And they always do it. It's a little goofy, but usually they do a pretty good job. And that's one of the most fun jobs of adapting the footage, is to be able to give opinions to them of things that you might think that from an American perspective would serve to improve it or improve toy sales. But that's something that very rarely comes up, but when it does, it's really, really fun.
Just don't suggest a female red ranger. They didn't have that.
Unfortunately. We'll now take it to the fans. I saw your hand with the green shirt first. Go ahead.
Yes, just be kind of loud and clear, okay?
Yeah.
Sorry about the region. So from NWR all the way up to Lost Galaxy, you had kind of a continuation of the same plot with Zoran and whatnot. You kind of passing the power, and we're all kind of innocent. And I believe you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I watched the Sentai, but in the Sentai, almost every season was different attacks. What was your obstacle and barriers to kind of putting that together, especially with NMPR through to half Turbo, when you still have the original cast members coming along? How do you make all that connection with the Sentai in?
So those shows were made in Heimsaban, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys know anything about Heimsaban? Anybody know him? There's only two people in the room who know Heimsaban. That's me, and this is our casting director, Iris, right there. Everybody know Iris? You want to be a doctor, that's who we talk to, right? And her husband sitting next to her is a wonderful man who was our production manager for many years on the show. So 150 people at the heart of the show is Iris right there. So Heimsaban, he thought, I'll tell you the secret, he thought the show was going to run for a few seasons, and that's it. But it took off. He thought that if we changed the cast over and over and over, that the fans might not enjoy, seeing it change. Because most American shows will stay with, Gilligan's Island. You guys are too young for Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's always the same Gilligan, right? So it doesn't become, Joe's Island next season. It's always Gilligan. So the Rangers, he thought, well, if we change it out, it's a problem. But yes, it's particularly a problem with the footage because some seasons there's 5, some seasons there's 6, some seasons there's 4. how do we explain when they come and go? You know, the first couple seasons, a few Rangers left. You guys remember that? And they went, I forget what was the explanation. You guys know what happened?
Switch to the Pittsburgh.
Okay. Okay, that's another secret story that I can't tell. But anyway, so it was very problematic, but Haim Saban, unlike what Greg had put up with Disney was very controlled. You know, they have a brand, they get involved in every story. Haim simply says, they're shooting on the mountain over here, and then, you know, the footage goes to this building over here, and then, you know, they get thrown through a tree and they end up inside the building. You know, he's like, you figure it out, you're the writers, and that's what I paid you for. And that's a blessing because he knows you'll do a good job, but he knows he's not a writer, so he stays out of it. Disney micromanages things a lot of the time, and it's a pain in the butt for people who create it because you're remaining heads. So I'm supposed to simply say, okay, you know, now there's 4 Rangers. How do we get rid of them? You know, I'm not going to waste my brain space on this. I got other things to do. You tell me how it's going to work. So you figure it out. You look at the footage. You figure it out. And you go to Haim and you pitch an idea, or you go to whoever owns the show, and they say yes or no, and that's it. So you know, somebody loses power this season. Shoot the Navy one season wanted to have chimpanzees. Go and scroll to chimpanzees. Have you ever dealt with chimpanzees on the set? You have people who sit with guns all the time because and the whole crew is warned. You can't look them in the eye because they'll attack you. So literally, people are like, you know, working in kind of a high tension environment. It's supposed to be. You guys are having fun watching it. We're all like, oh my god, it's kind of scary. So all these things become challenges, but especially that footage because Haim Saban wanted to keep the same cast, and so you know, God bless him, he did. And when the costumes change, and males become females, and you go from 4 to 6 and back down to 3, and then back up to 5. Where do they come from? What do they do? And some cast decided to retire and want to leave the show. You know, or somebody else says, I don't want somebody who wants to leave the show. All that stuff is a challenge. But you know what? That's your job as a writer, is you have to just somehow get creative and work it out. And there's no show, you know, we're a non-union show. So, like the people that I hired in New Zealand, I went to New Zealand, me and Jackie Marchand, you guys know who Jackie Marchand is? Right, so wonderful, wonderful lady who wrote the show with me, right? For many, many years. Lots of other writers too, but for many seasons, we lost a lot of our writers, and it was just Jackie and I. So we went to New Zealand, no writers. So I hired these 2 people who were kind of learning how to write, and I taught them how to write the show, and they were like shocked. We have to come up with everything. Yep, Japanese have a few ideas, and otherwise you come up with everything. And that's what you guys, if you want to adapt a show or create a show, that's what you have to do. You have to imagine the world as a blank canvas, and what are you going to do? You know, okay, you want to have a car that flies. You want to have a ranger who's gay. You know, and yeah, you're going to have headwinds to all those things, but it's your job to come up with a way of compromising, negotiating, not giving up, but somehow battling through to make that stuff happen because your audience wants you to do crazy stuff, especially on our show, right? Otherwise, it's boring if it's just normal stuff. So we have to do some crazy things. But everything is a battle. From the footage to the casting to the budget, everything is a battle on a show like this, which is what makes it fun.
You.
Well, first I want to say that Lightspeed Rescue is one of my top most favorite seasons, so thank you for that. Well, this is a question for Greg. I read an article saying that you wanted to like send the Sentai graduation season to for people awards for you that shown away. But can you guys maybe explain a little about that?
Sure, yeah. That was a similar situation where as we were wrapping SBD, they were getting us to sign off for the next season, and they only had 2 episodes of
Logic Ranger.
Yeah, Logic Ranger. And I was just like, this is, there's like the talking sunflower, and I was just like, okay, here's the deal. We're in New Zealand. Like, we're in Middle Earth, you know? So all this footage is about magic robots and there's powers. As Chip said, our second unit is so great that after SBD, they actually called and said, we're going to come film the opening sequence, we want Koichi, who's the stunt coordinator, to film this whole opening sequence for our next season. Like, so they started using us, and so I'm like, so why are we going to be trapped into this idea of these kids using magic in downtown Auckland? Like the same budget we can go, and I wanted to basically make the school like Hogwarts and do it like as a past, like a prequel to Mighty Morphin, where there were, these rangers in the past, and these like kind of Hogwarts students have to go on a quest through our version of Middle Earth to find these, and they were just like, hell no. Even though, I had my whole book of like all the things I created for SPD, and where they said, oh, you could just have your 2 main sets, and I ended up building like 25 sets for the same budget. They're like, you can have 5 aliens, 40 aliens. I was like, I could do this. And they were just like, no. I was like, all right. I'm not going to fight. Like, I don't want to do it if it's not going to be fun.
You.
Thank you. So I just kind of want to circle back to something you were saying earlier. You were saying that the Japanese are willing to take input on things that you'd like to see in the show. So there's a lot of repeating ranger themes, ninjas, dinosaurs. What is like a overall ranger theme that you would love to see done in a movie?
Yeah, you're saying like you said you can talk to the Japanese team about ideas, but there's these recurring things like ninjas, dinosaurs, always something. I
don't know if there's anything new that I mean, we kind of done everything, right? There's 8 or 9 episodes now. So I don't know that there's any themes that the Japanese do. I think they kind of covered all the things that kids love.
Western?
No.
Yeah, we try not to use animals too much. You guys ever watched the episodes in the last few years? There was a Labradoodle, there was 2 Labradoodles that would walk through the shot every now and then one of them died. And then so those were my dogs. Because what happens is we're doing an episode about somebody who wants a puppy, I think was the episode. And something about animals. And so you're walking through the park, somebody has a pair of keys, somebody has this or that. And I said, somebody has to have a dog. Well, you know what it costs to have a dog walk through a shot? You have to hire the dog, you have to hire the trainer, you have to pay the trainer the previous day for a day of training to be able to get the dog accommodated or acclimated to whatever the movement's going to be in that shot. So it ends up being, $1,000. And it just makes me so aggravated that the production assistants on the set are getting like $100 a day, but the person who walked the dog through is going to get $1,000. And so I would say, no, my partner will come and walk the dogs through the shot, and there's no charge. and so the dogs were in every season. You guys, if you watch closely, the dogs were in like the last 3 or 4 seasons. You guys ever see my dog? No. Never? Okay, watch more closely. It's got an apricot colored Labrador. 2 of them.
Take up more questions. You were yeah.
So one of my favorite aspects of Power Rangers is when you guys have episodes that are any separate. It's like 100% US shot. And I love that because like it's not like you're on balance, you can do whatever you want. My question is for those that very minimal pretty long feedback, but it just depends on the budget or more improved point. If you want to do a regular fight, you have to make a suit. You weren't able to do it or whatever.
Well, I would have to say, I don't know how it was for you. I was under Disney rule. So I did fight for it because there were just parts of, I was trying to tell an overall story, and I think they were thinking they're very episodically. And there were times, especially in the beginning, when I was trying to show that these were cadets who weren't Power Rangers and they had to learn how to be Power Rangers. So there just weren't things that fit, and I was trying to push against it. And I'm super curious to see if you have these rules, but they kept telling me, like, no, there are rules. Like, the audience will not watch this show unless every episode, characters morph, characters get their swords, and there's a fight. And I was like, because I didn't want in my first episode of these students to morph into Rangers and jump into the Zords. I wanted them to have to learn how to do that, and so I was trying to push it, and I got to push it as far as into the second episode where they had to. But in the first episode, they did not. But there was just all this stuff about there are these rules. So
yeah, if you look at the first few seasons, Haim Saban has had everything. He read every script. He'd come to the set quite often. He cared about every single little detail. And he watched every episode. He'd give us notes, and he was scathing sometimes. But then he kind of backed off after the show became popular, and he trusted us to do it because we were good. And so eventually, I went from being production manager to directing and writing, and then to being the story editor. And by then, he had very little to do with it. And that's when we made the shows that you guys all like. Lights, Being, and if you notice, there's not that much comedy in those. Those are a little bit more kind of dark Marvel kind of stories, right? And so in those, we would try to minimize Megazord fights, because honestly, they're not my favorite part. There's no plot to them. There are fights where people just fight, and cut from Ranger to Ranger to Ranger, and that's just a fight, okay? And in the script, you literally write, and this is literally what you write in the script, you say, the Rangers run in to the warehouse, the villains run out of the shadows, and they kick, they punch, they fly, they zip, they zor. That's it. That's it. And then the second unit comes, if they have a half a day, they'll give you a 40-second fight. And if they have a whole day, they'll give you a minute 10 fight. And you'll cut as much as you need into the footage. But the footage that is just fights is kind of boring to me. I mean, there's some good moves and we keep them, but when there's a fight that actually has a plot, where you have to rescue somebody, or there's a vial that is tumbling on the ground and you're trying to get it, or somebody is slowly turning into a werewolf as they fight. Those are much more interesting, right? Because you can play with the timing and you can add suspense to them. Megazord fights are never like that. Very rarely. They're pretty damn boring, right? Two sides come in, they fight. If somebody flies or fires a missile, yeah, there's some things you want to keep in there because it's cool, but generally speaking, you get in, you get out because you have to sell toys. The most common time that we don't do Zord fights is in the first episode because, as Greg said, we're introducing the Rangers and you spend so much time, you make the first, we used to be on the habit of always making the first the premiere episode into like a two-parter. And two-parters are, they don't like it. The networks don't like it. Why? Because they get played out of order. And so now suddenly they're playing part two when there was never a part one and the audience gets confused and they go away. So I understand that. We would always try to make sure there was a recap and make sure there's enough of each one that we can enjoy them alone. But they don't like two-parters. But to do away with the Megazord fight was a challenge. You could do it if you wanted to, but you always had to have some kind of big finale no matter what, because the kids do expect a formula, right? That's what they're watching for.
We'll take one more question, and let's see, you over there, and listen, you made it making good, it's the last one. No pressure.
All right, well, speaking of things that are unique to the Western, making your own food and everything, how involved were you with battle licensing and super battle armor? Because you don't see these in Japan unless you come really recently into some of the most recent Sentai series. But was the production decision, was it your decision? How do you mesh that with actually writing into the series? We need the entire one or two part of these going here. And sometimes they change finale too. How do you get around that?
So, all right, well, here's the thing we're not supposed to say. What of it? Yeah. Power Rangers is a toy commercial. They're like, you can't tell anyone. I'm like, I think they know. So, we get the footage, and there's the Rangers, there's the Megazords, there's all that stuff. Those are all created as toys by Bandai, Toy Design, all that stuff. We inherit all that, and there's a certain amount of that gets sold here. The morphers, all that stuff. I don't know when it started. I don't know if it was a Disney thing or if it happened before, but it's like, everyone wants more and everyone wants their own little piece. So someone was like, well, what's something we can make for our show that we can make a toy? And then for us, for sure, we had the Battleizers and we had the motorcycles. Why why there's no motorcycles for the girls, I don't know. And it's just, it's like in the modern world, and girls don't ride motorcycles. I'm like, ooh, this is the 1940s, like what is happening? And Alicia will tell you, like, well, I had the Jeep, so I was fine. But Monica didn't get to drive, she was just in the passengers. But anyway, so with the Battleizers, they were still, like I had input on mine. My dream with Rick, who was also inherited from Decker Ranger, I love the design. Again, at the time, I had a pit bull terrier that looked exactly like Rick. So I was like, great, my dog is in the show. But they didn't do anything. All he turned into in that footage was the gun, the cannon. And I was like, all right, I'm going to redesign him. Like, he'll look the same, but internally he's going to be able to turn into all these different things. The scooter, the refrigerator, so when the opportunity came up for the Battleizers, it's got to be Rick. And they did a great job with it. But we weren't like, it would be a cool thing to have in this show. It just came from the merchandising team. Like, this is a toy you have to sell.
And can I just say something that kind of it's not quite so cynical. So everybody thinks the show is a commercial, but isn't everything on TV and everything in the movie theater a commercial? It's all trying to sell itself. So you'll come and watch it, watch the commercials, you buy the toys if there are toys. They're all like that. But if you go to sleep every night saying that your life is all about trying to sell somebody else's toys, that's not a pleasant way to sleep. So here's what I tell my writers. And this is something I learned from a guy named Brian Golden, who's the CEO of all of Hasbro, right? He started out as the kind of sales rep from Bandai on Power Rangers, and when Hasbro finally bought the show, it was because Brian Golden went from being a sales rep from Bandai to being the guy in charge of all of Hasbro. Really terrific guy. He told me in the parking lot at the Red Lobster one night, he said, the way to sell toys is to have a show where the kids who watch it aspire to be friends of the Rangers. And this is not what we all want. Don't we all want to have friends like the Rangers? When we write the show, we create the show. We're not just, we want villains that are realistic and they're terrible people, but we also, the Rangers, we build them as characters that we would love to know and we would love to hang out with. Wouldn't we all love to hang out with every single one of those Rangers? Or to be them, or to have their skills, or to see the world the way they can? And if you can tell stories that put you in their shoes or holding their hand as their friend, then forget about selling toys. They're going to sell themselves. You tell the story, and I always tell my writers, we tell the stories and the toys will sell themselves. Hasbro, Disney, Heimspun never came to me and said, we want you to do, we need to sell more of this, so put this more in the show, or make that more heroic, because we need to. They never ever said that to me. They always, they might say, this is the toy schedule for the season, and we would figure out a way of using it, and we'd find heroic ways to do it. But always in the context of a story that makes our fans love the Rangers more. Because having the gift, the privilege, the honor, the responsibility of 30 minutes of millions of kids Saturday morning is really big. And you can't waste that on a commercial. You have to spend that wisely on time that you teach them something, you show them something, a better way of doing something, a better way of being a person, a better way of being a friend, a better way of making a friend. And if you can move their lives, not by miles, but by inches over the course of the few years that they'll watch our show, then you can sleep at night with a smile on your face because you've done something wonderful. And after the decades go by, you're still doing the same damn thing. And first time I ever realized that was I came to Morphicon and people like you came up to me and said, wow, I love this episode, it meant so much to me. I never knew that we were making such a difference to people. But you go on any show that you guys want, you're talking about being, you guys are not just fans. Because fans, if we were actors, you would just be fans. You guys are fans who are interested in making a show like ours, and writing it, and developing it, and figuring out how to make. You have even the slightest bit of interest. The first thing you have to know is you have to find a good reason to do it. And it can't be to get rich, and it can't be, something shallow. If you go into it with the goal of actually wanting to make somebody's life or the world a slightly better place, not a big change, but the smallest change, with thousands of characters over the course of hundreds of episodes, you're going to make a difference. And that's when you can all be proud of what you do. And I'm very proud of what I did for all these years, and I'm sure Greg is as well, and everybody out there is, and they're all dying to meet you guys because clearly they made a difference out there, or people wouldn't come from miles and miles around to pay them money to meet them. So anyway, so you compliment all of us by being here, and I really appreciate you taking the time to ask us all your questions about our silly goofy show. It actually makes a difference.
So I was just informed that the next panel, the couples panel, is actually canceled. So we have the room for one more hour. So are you guys up for maybe a couple more questions since we have them a little bit longer?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Black and True.
Oh wait, which teas? Which one are you talking about? Right. So so how many people like our band? Yeah. So that's a Disney show. So and that one was one where Disney didn't have their hands on. They let them make, in my opinion, even though I know you guys like RPM, it was a little too close to the company. What 3 to 6-year-old wants to watch a visual novel that's right at the store? I thought it was impressive. But I came in there and we did the show, and then the trajectory of the characters, the plot, the setting, all established already, right? And I thought it was wonderful. I just thought it was a good program for little kids, because the world is depressing enough without telling everybody what happens. So every now and then, you all make decisions in a vacuum, you make it with a group of people, everybody has different feelings slightly about the show, and we just wanted to, have fun with it, and we do it quite often. I mean, I forget what season it was, but season with all the prisoners, the monster prisoners in the spaceship, right, where at the very end, we think it all died, but then the camera comes down and we find a hand moving or something, and in this case it was, a light blinking. And we did it just because we wanted to imply that life goes on. Sometimes when you frame an actor, you don't frame them perfectly. Sometimes you want to make sure there's actors who are half cut off because you want to imply there's the world goes on beyond the frame of the television set. And the same thing happens in the story. So here, at the very end, we show everybody thinks everything's over with, they're all celebrating, but the red lights are blinking, this guy's still alive, and oh my God, what's going to happen next? The season's over with. But then, as you know, right, decades later, we picked that up again, and it actually kind of worked kind of nice. It was kind of fun, right? It was a fun plot point. Now, little TV kids don't know it because they don't remember the show from 10 years ago, but in one of the first seasons, we implied that the villain's still alive somewhere in the code, and then later on, when the computer code takes over, we implied that it was that one from 20 years ago. And it works for older fans who know the one before, and it works for younger fans who didn't know. So it just kind of worked magically, and it was really fun. As a writer, when you find things you can call back to that will be understandable and appreciated by everybody, it makes it a lot of fun to write the show that way. So, I think that at the beginning, we had that idea, but we didn't want to give it away too much because obviously everybody would guess it and it would be a kind of surprise. But at the same time, every time you write an episode, your production is racing to get these things done, and you're trying to keep the scripts up because they're coming down. Everything is waiting on scripts, right? So you're getting them done, you just don't have time to think 20 episodes ahead of what's going to happen, except in very broad strokes. So things change as you move along, until you finally get to the episode where you're going to do that reveal, and a lot of other things have changed, and you may have done a good job of laying the track for it, maybe you did a poor job. The last few episodes you try to lay a little more, try to give some hints and clues, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. And really good showrunners make it work really well, and people who won't really give a damn maybe don't make it work so well. And I don't know if things work really well less because we have so many other things we're up against. Like the scripts and the tapes coming in and all kinds of strange things happening that we can't anticipate. But that one we had an idea at the beginning it was going to look that way. And I think it was kind of cool, personally.
You brought him up, and I realize that's another connection to Super Sentai I would like to bring up, is Koichi Sakamoto, who has worked with both of you, if I'm not mistaken. And now he's just Mr. Toad. He's now done Ultraman, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai. What can you tell us about working with Koichi Sakamoto?
It was great. It was a little intimidating at first because you have to remember, I was the lead movie. The guy had, kind of touched on the first Power Rangers movie, which is involved with some more costumes, very briefly. And then, other than having friends that worked on various seasons, I was an outsider. But that was one of the reasons why Disney picked me. I was working on some other things with them, and they were just like, "Oh, you'll fit in good here. We need some fresh blood." But unfortunately, that term, fresh blood, went over to New Zealand and kind of scared everyone. They thought I was more like a cleaner, I was coming in to, kind of take accounting on everyone and keep people out. And, this was Koichi's baby. He had been involved since almost the very beginning. So at first it was this weird kind of intimidating, he was very quiet and really want to talk about it. And I was trying to do all these new ideas. Then, after we had written the first episode, because I was going to direct it, I storyboarded the whole thing, and I storyboarded what I wanted for second unit. And they were like, "Oh, no, you can't do that, you can't give Koichi." But I was like, well, I at least want to show them what's in my mind. And we didn't really talk a lot about it, but he went out and shot, and when the footage came back, it was frame for frame what I had boarded. And I was like, wow. And I just went and thanked him, and then from that point on, we were just great friends. He just tried to, come to me. And, there were little things like the female Red Ranger or, certain things where I just wanted to do things differently. And he was one of the main people that were there are rules, I was like, yeah, but, we're 13 years into this. We got to, break it a little to make it, but in terms of stunts, I've worked with a lot of stunt people on a lot of movies. And just, as Chip said, you go out there, they could probably make more money just selling tickets to watch these guys do the stunts. They could do these things, there'd be 50 wires, and then, the person would go up and do 1,000 swings, so professional, so tight, and like I said, even though he had been involved with the Japanese side from the beginning, when they finally saw SPD footage, they were like, you know what, we're going to start coming and shooting blue guys. He's just that good. His whole team is white.
When we started Power Rangers, we hired Hollywood stuntmen to go on the fights. Well, first we actually tried having some of the Rangers cast me in my costumes, and that went nowhere. That was awful. Is it out? They don't know about that. A few of them know that they're karate, but not all. That's not a prerequisite as Iris was up. You don't have to know karate to be a Power Ranger. So what we did was we hired these Hollywood stuntmen, and the fights for the Japanese, cutting in are all really great karate fights, right? Then you cut to our fight, and they were punches, or fisticuffs, Western fights. And it was really embarrassing. It was awful. They were good stuntmen, but there was a completely different fighting stuff. They didn't know karate. So Jonathan Zahor, who was the producer at the time, he said, well, why don't we get people from Japan? And I was like, oh my God, can we do that? So we called our friends in Japan who were making the show, and we said, can you send us a stunt team? And they sent us a stunt team. They didn't speak English, and Koichi was the leader, and they started to do, what we asked them to make this footage work. And it was, they weren't great at first. but they were much better than the Americans had been. But shortly they became very good, led by Koichi. And Koichi is evidence. You guys all heard of quiet quitting recently? So my advice would be, if you want to quietly quit, just quit, because that means you have a dead-end job. If you want to have a job, you want to actually get ahead, like Koichi did, who came here, didn't know what the hell he was doing on our show. We told him, he figured it out, and I'm telling you, within a couple seasons, anything you would ask him to do, they figure out. His answer was always, remember, Iris in the meetings, he would say, show. That was what I said. Can you have him walk across the ceiling and you want to do like a zero gravity fight? Show. And it was always sure. It was never a no, because he would just go figure it out with his team. And he would do storyboards to more complicated stuff. His crew would then come in on the weekends, unbeknownst to us, they'd come in on the weekends and they would do their stunt training practice on the weekends. If someone got cut or hurt,
Back to action.